Welcome to the creepy story for sleep. Get ready to dive into the most terrifying stories you've ever heard. But before we begin, tell me, from which city are you watching this video? Leave it in the comments below, and if you're brave enough to face the terror that's coming, show your support with a. I had just finished a really tough year of college and planned on taking it easy for the summer. But I'm broke and my friends were going to Germany in August, so I needed some extra cash to pay for it. I tried asking my parents for the money. They just laughed at me and told me to get a job. It's not fair, my friends had everything paid for them, but then again, their parents were actually nice. I'd bet if it was my little sister that was going, they would fly her out there first class. They think the sun shines out of her ass. They expected me to look after some little brat all summer, while my friends were relaxing at the beach. To make it worse, I hated babysitting, but what choice had I got? The only upside was the money. It was good, I mean really good. That's the only reason I'd ever take a job looking after a snotty little shit like that. Her name was Sarah. She had just moved in, around the corner from us. My mom got talking to her mom Kate at the store and offered my services, without my permission, I might add. When she came home, all she could talk about was how adorable she was. It makes me sick. I know I might come off a bit severe. I do like children. Well, maybe like is a bit too strong of a word. I can bear them, in small doses that is. But I really hate that blondie little troll and her stupid ponytail. Everyone thought she was so cute, with her "I'm sorry" and shit like that. She only talks like that to distract people from what she really is, the bitch. Again, it's easy to judge me without knowing the full story. She's not the pretty little princess that she lets on, no. She's a monster. The first time I met her, I thought she was perfect too. She acted like a polite, well-mannered gift from God. She always done everything I asked her to do, and never made a mess. I didn't even have to entertain her. She would just sit at her table doodling all day. Every night before I left, she would give me a drawing of us holding hands smiling. My mom loved them. She started hanging them on the fridge. So, at first it was not all bad. All I had to do was sit and watch TV all day and get paid for it. Her parents worked together and were always home by 8 every night. As soon as they got in the door, they used to rush me out of there. I found this a bit strange, but assumed it was because of Sarah's bedtime. I often heard them argue about it, but I never understood why it was such a big deal, until that horrible night. It was about 8:30, and for the first time her parents were late. I didn't mind, but Sarah started to become agitated, and found it hard to sit still. Her legs were rocking over and back under the table. Then she began to sing. For a while I thought it was a nursery rhyme from some kid's show, until I actually listened to the words. 9 o'clock is when I wake, so in my bed I need to wait, or the evil will be free to take full control of me. So lock my door, throw away the key until morning, or you will see. It started to freak me out, so I asked her to stop, but it only made things worse. She started swinging her legs faster while shouting the words louder and louder. For a finish, I had to cover my ears with my hands. I didn't know what to do. Then, all of a sudden, she just stopped. I asked her if she was okay, but she wouldn't answer me. She was just sitting there staring down at the table. I looked at the clock. It was 8:53, and there was still no sign of her parents. I slowly made my way over to her, nervously calling her name, but she still didn't answer me. I was becoming worried. I thought there was something wrong with her. I put my hand on her shoulder and was about to speak when she growled at me. I thought, what the fuck is wrong with her, and shouted, "Sarah!" She must have snapped out of it because she began to speak. "I need to go to bed now." I replied, "Your parents will be back in a minute. You can go to bed then," in a nice calm tone. She started to become really aggressive then, and shouted, "I need to go to bed now. It's nearly 9, as she got up and made her way out of the kitchen and down the hallway. I ran after her, grabbed her arm and said, "No, wait for your parents," in a stern voice. That's when she showed her true colors. She started kicking and screaming, and when I wouldn't let her go, she bit me on the arm, then ran down the hallway towards her room. I was fuming. I too chased after her as fast as I could, but it was too late. She ran into her room and locked the door. I tried to open it, but it had some sort of electronic lock on it. I slapped the door with my hand full force, with temper, but it was metal, and I nearly broke my hand. I was surprised. It just seemed like any normal wooden door by looking at it. There was a small window halfway up the door. When I looked and the light was off, I could just about see her in the corner. I ordered her to come out, but she just laughed uncontrollably in a weird voice. It seemed to go from a deep berry white tone to a high-pitched screech that only dogs could probably hear. Then she started to sing the stupid song again. It was then I heard the front door opening. I turned and looked down the hallway to see who it was, but I couldn't see anything. When I looked back, she was staring at me through the small window on the door. It looked like she was wearing some sort of creepy mask. Then I heard her dad Liam calling me. He sounded concerned. I called him down because I wanted to show him what his daughter was up to, but she was gone by the time he got there. I was still pissed when I told him what had happened, but he was really nice about it and gave me a big bonus for my troubles. He said Sarah has a condition and gets very cranky if she stays up late. I don't know what kind of condition she has, but surely there is some kind of medication for it, is what I said to him before storming out of there. On that walk home, I swore that I'd never set one foot inside that door ever again. The next day, he rang me again to apologize. He said Sarah really liked me and she would never shut up about me when I left. I thought, wow, first of all, I never heard her say more than 3 words at a time. Second, if she liked me that much and still tried to take a lump out of my arm, what would she do to someone she didn't like? He swore it would never happen again and offered me a lot more money. He even said he would pay for some of my trip if I just stayed. I still said no, I wanted to be done with it. I started looking for a new job straight away, none of which would pay anything even close to what he was giving me. By that night I started to feel deflated. Every job seemed like work, I suppose. I was just used to sitting on my ass watching TV every day. Now I'd have to actually do something. I was running out of time and would have to work some serious hours to make enough money to go on that trip, so I was ready to give up. I was about to call my friends and let them know I wouldn't be going, when Liam rang again. This time he offered to pay for the whole trip. All I would need was spending money. I told him I'd think about it. He said I have to let him know by tomorrow or he will find someone else. I don't really want to go back to that little shit, but I will get a free trip out of it, plus it's only for a few weeks. For starters, I'm a single father of a 14-year-old teenager. His mother unfortunately passed away during childbirth, and so I was left with my biggest sorrow and joy at once. Raising him all alone has been quite the task, but I've received a lot of help and pointers from both my parents and my late wife's parents. Jason is a good kid, he has good grades, is respectful and understanding, and doesn't try to make my life living hell, like I hear some other parents of teenagers explain. One persistent problem throughout his life has been sleep. He has always had difficulties with sleep, first when he was just a baby, then a preschool kid, school, and even now, a teenager, experiencing the exact same problems. We've been to the doctors, and they've told us he has insomnia, and I believed it, until recently. He came into my room at around midnight 3 weeks ago and woke me up, although I wasn't actually sleeping yet. "Dad, I can't sleep," he said, and he looked scared. almost terrified. I could tell by his faint shaking and the way he held himself. "What's wrong, buddy?" I asked him, and he glanced at the now shut door and flinched. "It's just—" He was tapping his fingers on his crossed arms. He didn't look embarrassed or afraid to tell me like he had been numerous times before, when he broke something or misbehaved. This time he looked almost confused, unable to formulate the words. "There's always a dark figure in my room. Just watching me while I sleep. I can feel his eyes on me." His voice was shaky. I could see the tears forming in his eyes. He was completely terrified, and he fell right into my arms, starting to sob. Now normally any parent would just believe it to be a bad dream, but I thought of the worst, that there's an intruder. After he calmed down enough, I told him that I'd go look in his room and check. So like in horror movie fashion, I picked up a large kitchen knife and tiptoed all throughout the apartment, seeing if there are any intruders or evidence of a break-in, and in the end I found nothing. Peculiarly though, his closet door was cracked open. As I was walking back to my bedroom, I heard him scream my name, and I ran inside with my knife at the ready. He was here. Jason was pointing with his finger to the darkest corner of the room, sobbing uncontrollably. In the end, I found no one and nothing, and he slept with me that night. This thing kept occurring every other day, where Jason would come to my room and just shake, and every single time he'd say that this dark thing is stalking him, getting closer each night. By the end of the week, he'd just sneak into my bed by himself, without waking me, and I'd find him there in the morning. 2 weeks ago, I ordered a cheap set of simple security cameras, and put them up around the apartment while he was at school, including one in his room. Yes, I know teenager privacy matters, and I really shouldn't put cameras around the apartment, let alone his room, but I needed to get to the bottom of this thing that's happening. And I planned on taking them down after a week or two. The next morning I found Jason huddled up next to me in my bed again. It was a Saturday, so I had no work and quietly slid out of bed as to not wake him and made a coffee while turning on the laptop. I shuffled through the cameras and the recorded footage. The quality wasn't the best, but the cameras were cheap, so what did I expect? Jason's room was mostly quiet all night. From the moment he got into bed until the moment he got out and came to my room, he didn't move once, not a single moment. I tried enhancing the footage, making it brighter, to see the darkest corners of the room, but it still was too dark. When I re-watched the sped-up footage for the third time, I finally noticed something. While Jason was in bed, his closet was closed, and shortly after he left, his closet cracked open just slightly. I found the exact moment it happened, around 2 minutes after he left. I slowed down the footage, and the closet fucking opened by itself. Even I was freaked out now. I went on Amazon right away and ordered night vision cameras, which cost a small fortune. The next 2 days, I continued observing the footage. The second night, Jason never came to my room, and he never moved from his sleeping position until I woke him. His closet also remained shut on the second day. However, during the first day, after he left, it cracked open again shortly after. Once the new cameras arrived, I installed them in his room again and re-watched the footage the following morning. Jason stayed up very late that night, almost to 2 a.m., and he never went to bed in his room. He came straight to mine. This time, I watched the closet with such intensity that I thought even I could open it just by thinking about it, and sure enough, 2 or 3 minutes later, it cracked open. I zoomed in as much as possible and slowed down the footage, and that's when I saw it. A shadow moved across the room in a split second and past the closet, and the next split second, the closet cracked open. I slowed it down even more, re-watched it again and again. I couldn't make out the figure. It was simply a blob of a shadow. I sighed and went to my room to wake up Jason. Those last days I had to wake him up. because he'd sleep in for as long as he could, and even after sleeping for 12+ hours he'd still look tired, bags under his eyes. The next night was the last night Jason was awake. I woke up with him sleeping beside me as was usual these past few weeks. I slipped out quietly, not that it mattered, and went on with my morning routine of coffee and watching through the footage. He stayed up late again, 3 a.m. I considered scolding him for staying up so late on a school night, as I shifted through the footage. Strangely though, the closet door never cracked open during the entire night. I coincidentally decided to look through the old cameras that still were set up everywhere else, including my room. And that's when my jaw dropped and I saw it. Clear as day, a shadow of a skeletal hand hovering right above my son, on the wall behind him, the entire fucking night. I ran to my room and tried to wake him gently as I did every morning, but he didn't budge. Then I tried violence. I shaked him and screamed at him to wake up. He didn't. I called the ambulance, having nothing else left to do. He was diagnosed in a coma. I kept watching those recordings again and again, dating back weeks ago, and I found something even more horrifying. Every night as Jason came to my room to sleep, the shadow followed him. I watched through multiple cameras as the shadow sped from his room to the hallway, to the kitchen, and then into mine, all within a couple seconds, and then there, in my room, it loomed right over him, getting closer and closer every single night. I don't know how to describe it. It's unlike anything I've seen before, a shadow, but so dark, so black, that the darkness of the room illuminated it in a strange way. This brings me to last week's and today's events. I, too, have started feeling a presence. I, too, have started seeing the shadow looming at the corner of my eye, and I, too, have started having it inching closer to me as I sleep every single night. I frantically put together a timeline today, and judging by it, today is the last day I'll be able to wake up on my own, which means unless I'm awoken tomorrow, I won't wake up again. I drove to my parent house today and am going to spend the night here. They have very specific instructions to wake me. I want to see if this thing will follow me all the way here too, and I still need to figure out how to wake up my son, and figure out what this thing did to him. My name is Matt. Please remember it. I never thought I'd be making a part 2, but here I am. The last 12 hours have been a total roller coaster of emotions, and I haven't been able to have even a second of sleep for the last 18, ever since I woke up. Let me begin where I left off last time, my parents' house. I never once tried explaining to them what I had seen or experienced. I knew they wouldn't understand. They wouldn't even try to understand. They were always big skeptics of the unknown, always thinking there's a logical explanation to everything, and in this case there was one too, even if there wasn't. My parents woke me up at 1 p.m. They thought I'd wake up by myself, but I didn't. I startled awake to my father's worried face peering down into my eyes. "I thought you wouldn't wake up," he had said in a concerned tone, then cleared his throat and started walking off. "Go shower." I got up, feeling like I hadn't slept at all. My body was completely exhausted. I felt different, almost like something was missing, a big part of myself. I tried to remember what I even was doing in my parents' house in the first place. Then I remembered setting up my phone to film me. I remembered the shadow, but I couldn't remember why I tried to film it. The footage captured by my flimsy phone camera, with no way to properly enhance it, was useless to me, and it didn't film anything noteworthy. I decided to check my phone and found thousands of your notifications, and my post from that Friday. That post that I don't remember writing. "Jason, a son. I have a son. What?" Questions flooded my mind as I read and reread the words I didn't recall writing. I frantically drove back to my apartment, not really sure what I was looking for. I explored every room and found my apparent sunroom. Tidy and clean, a couple superhero posters on the walls, a desk with a laptop on it, a bed with Marvel design covers. My head was spinning. A horrible migraine, so I popped a pill. Jason. Jason. I had written that I had a son named Jason. I took out my phone and called my dad. "Hey Matt, what's going on? You left so urgently." "Jason. Do you remember Jason?" I huffed into the receiver. "Jason. No. Can't say I do. Is that a friend of yours? Did something happen?" He replied thoughtfully. "Fuck," I thought. "No, never mind. Thanks, Dad." I hung up before he could say a word more. This clearly fucking says I have a son named Jason. Jason that is in a coma. I went through my phone. There were no pictures of a 14-year-old boy anywhere on there. I looked all around the house. No photo albums. Absolutely no evidence of him ever existing here besides a child's seemingly untouched room. My heart was aching. My head was spinning. The feeling of missing something, but not knowing what it is, like it's at the tip of your tongue, it was unbearable. I found a death certificate of my wife and carefully read through. It clearly fucking said that she passed while giving childbirth. So where is the fucking child? Why can't I remember him? I remember her clearly. I rummaged through the house, making a total mess of it all, but in the end I found nothing. No birth certificate, no old documents, or teacher's notes, or doctor's appointments. I collapsed on the couch in the living room feeling exhausted, my eyes heavy. But something was tugging at the back of my head to not sleep. So I picked up my laptop instead, and that's when I rediscovered the camera footage I talked about last post. I saw him. I clearly saw my son, Jason, who I didn't remember, climbing into my bed at 3 a.m. I saw the shadowy thing or figure, his skeletal hand hovering above him. Then going forward until the morning, I saw myself screaming and shaking him awake, but he never woke up. I rushed to the hospital. I thought I might have left him in. I needed to see him. "Jason, I need to see Jason," I said to the receptionist, out of breath. "Jason. I don't think we have a patient named Jason here." The young lady replied, not looking up to me. "A 14-year-old boy in a coma?" I questioned. "Oh, his name is Jason? Are you a guardian?" "What?" I whispered under my breath. "I'll need to see some ID, please." She continued. I pulled out my passport and handed it to her. "Do you have his ID as well?" I stuttered. "I don't." "Then I'm afraid I can't let you see him." She finally looked at me, looked into my eyes, with this regretful look. "Look, wait, I have proof he is my son. I have videos of him living in my apartment. Let me go get my laptop from my car," I said, and before she replied, I scurried away. And would you fucking believe it? My laptop, it was fucking gone. There was literally no evidence of any break-in into my car. I didn't go back in there. There was no point. I took out my phone and read the post again. I needed to make sure I wasn't going insane. It sure as hell felt like I was. How is it possible to forget you have a child? How is it possible the rest of the world forgets it too? I saw a couple of direct messages. One of them caught my interest. "I know what you're dealing with." It might have as well been a troll, but I had nothing to lose, so I wrote back. "Please help me." I drove back to my apartment, thinking of sleep the entire way there, but a voice at the back of my mind kept telling me not to. "Do not sleep." It warned me. "You will regret it." I observed the sorry state of my crazed apartment as I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I put on the kettle for a coffee and checked the messages. This is an entity straight out of your worst nightmares. It enters your life like a parasite during sleep paralysis and inches closer to you, draining your life force itself as it does so. A following message came in. It preys on you when you are at your most vulnerable, in a state of sleep. The longer it's attached to you, the more tired you will feel every night, and the more life it will drain out of you, until the usual healthy amount of sleep no longer can recharge your body. That's what happened to your son. His energy ran out. He needs more sleep than ever before to be able to wake up, and it won't let him. This thing it can divide itself, keep its victims paralyzed, so they cannot wake up on their own, and once you're weak enough, they can't be woken up by anyone else either. It'll continue draining on him until the day he dies. This is absolutely batshit fucking crazy. I recall this shadow, this eerie feeling of someone constantly watching me, and I also wrote about it in my last post. What's it called? I asked, and then right after, and how in the hell did it erase someone from existence? It's complicated. I'll give you an address. Come there, and no matter what, don't sleep. I put in the address into the GPS, and it's a 1.5-hour drive. I stocked up on coffee and got into my car straight away. The entire drive there, I felt the presence at the back of my neck, and I could see slight shadows moving at the corner of my eye, but when I looked towards it, everything was as still as ice. After the excruciating 1.5 hours were over, I sent the mystery man a message. I'm here. The address was of an old, almost abandoned-looking house. I stepped out of my car and headed to the front door. Before I could knock, it swung open, and an elderly, homeless-looking man with a long, dirty beard and grayed-out hair stood there, looking me up and down. "Sir?" I asked, and he motioned for me to come in. The inside of the house was nothing like the outside. It was clean and tidy, and every nook and crevice was lit up with blinding light. "They can't exist where there's no shadow," he had said, as if expecting my question. Every piece of fernite was made out of see-through glass. There was not a single object that would cast a shadow, besides us two, and even then the lights took our shadows out. He motioned for me to sit on the ground. "Try to straighten out. Allow no shadows to be cast by your body." I sat down with my legs stretched out and my arms beside me, and he sat across from me, mirroring my position. He looked at me for a long moment, and I was having a hard time concentrating. The lights were unbearably bright. As I was about to speak, he did so first. "It has no name." He looked wishfully to the ceiling, and then continued. "There are many that visit you in your sleep, some good, some bad. Sleep paralysis is a logically explained occurrence of your mind being awake, but your body not. However, it's not as simple as that. It's not that your mind is awake. Your mind is between being awake and being asleep. That in between is where these demons lie in wait in the darkness. Most can only scare you. They can't cause any harm, but there are few, like the one on your hands, that can cause a lot of hurt. How do you get rid of it?" I asked in disbelief. He motioned with his hands to the house. "Once he lets himself in, only light can keep him away from you. Do you not sleep?" Still being sore from a long drive here, I instinctively crossed my legs. The man looked at me with such intensity that only my father gave me when I misbehaved as a child. "Don't make shadows," he warned again, and I uncrossed my legs. "I do," he explained. "I sleep in bright light. Over time, its connection to you grows faint, it eventually losing interest in you." How did it erase the existence of my son? I asked after a long moment. I can't remember him at all. Jason, was it? He said, and with a nod continued. That I do not know. This thing doesn't have that kind of power, which means you might have more than one of these things on your hands. His eyes widened as he stood up. I can't tell you any more. You need to leave now. Why did you even invite me here? It doesn't matter anymore. I answered enough questions. Make sure there's not a single shadow in your home if you wish to survive. And I'm sorry for your son, but it seems like he's too far gone. After he basically threw me out, I sat in my car for a long moment. I decided that I wanted to see my son. I started the car up and drove all the way back and into the hospital's parking lot. By the time I was back, it was 11 p.m. again. A new receptionist sat at the desk, and I tried to explain my situation as logically and best as possible. So please, just let me see him. Even through a window is fine. She looked at me with a conflicted expression. Fine, you only get 5 minutes. She led me to his room, and there he was, the boy from the videos, laying there in darkness. I observed him through the window, wishing to remember all that he once meant to me. A shadow moved at the corner of my eye, and I followed it. A dark silhouette was in the room with my son, as if hiding itself in the corner. Hey! I screamed, and the receptionist came running back. There's someone in there. She rushed into the room and turned on the light, and I was right behind her. There was nothing there. She sighed a sigh of relief. You need to go, sir. No, please, you have to believe me. There was this shadow. I saw it, I swear. Calm down, sir. There's nothing in the room. That's when my emotions burst, and I just started crying. The receptionist led me back to the lobby, and I just sat down and sobbed. After all my tears dried up, I got back on my phone and looked at the Reddit post again. Then I decided to ask for help with an update. If anyone knows how to make the world remember, how to make myself remember of his existence, please, for the love of God, tell me. I can see the nurses sharing hushed whispers as I sit here in the lobby writing this. Chances are they'll kick me out, or worse yet, lock me up. My name is Matt. If it takes me, please don't forget me like I forgot him. I want to remember. This just happened to me this morning, and I'm genuinely afraid for my life right now. My parents are scared to let me leave the hotel room we're in, since we have no clue where it is. For all we know, it's already in the room. I don't know what to do at this point except post this story and warn you all. About a month ago, I downloaded a sleep tracker. I don't necessarily sleep poorly, but I was intrigued by the thought of what my sleep patterns were like. After a little bit of searching on the App Store, I found a sleep tracker that had a perfect 5 stars. It had a few hundred reviews, and none of them looked bought or fake, so I downloaded it. The app was just called Sleep Tracker 2023, uploaded by a company named Sleep Tracker App, which was an odd name to me, but it wasn't anything too strange. I set it up that night. The way it worked, and I assume how most of these apps work, is that you'd put your phone next to your pillow and click the button that said, bedtime. After that, you'd set an alarm, turn off your phone, and go to bed. It would track your breathing patterns throughout the night, and in the morning, you'd get an overview of how you slept. It showed you how long you snored, how long it took you to fall asleep, all of the basic things. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary yet, and it was fun seeing my sleep data every morning. After a few weeks, the first odd occurrence happened. One morning I woke up, and there was a new section in the data section, labeled Audio. I clicked on it, curious, and I saw 3 audio samples taken from throughout the night. All of them were about 5 seconds long, and each had a timestamp on them, with each sample being about 2 hours apart. I clicked on the first one, and heard me snoring extremely loudly for the full 5 seconds. I knew I snored, but I didn't know it was that loud. I clicked on the second one, and I heard me roll over and then fart into the microphone, which got a giggle out of me. I clicked on the third one, and heard me just mumbling in my sleep. Barely any of it was coherent, except for something about missing schoolwork, which was funny because I just graduated the past year. The only thing really weird about this was that I couldn't find a mention of it in the patch notes, and there was no text tutorial for it like all the other features, but I quickly brushed that aside. I figured they had just forgotten to mention in the update, and since it was a part of the sleep data, it didn't really necessitate a tutorial of its own. Everything after that was relatively normal. All of the audio recordings were pretty mundane, most just being me snoring. A little bit after this, about a week, someone had broken into our neighbor's house and robbed him, which shook up my parents pretty badly. My dad ended up going out and buying a bunch of those security cameras that you connect to with an app and can see through them on your phone. Everyone in the house was connected to it, since each of us were home alone often, so I could check the cameras at any point. Then something really odd happened. It was maybe 2 weeks later when I woke up and checked the app. There was now a 4th section labeled Photos. This seemed odd to me, as I didn't know what photos it would have taken, seeing as my phone was off and under my pillow. I clicked on it, and it was photos from the security cameras. It never asked me to update the app's permissions, and I hadn't even updated the app in about a week. I clicked through the photos, and everything was normal, save for a rabbit in our yard visible from the outside cam. It wasn't the pictures that weirded me out, it was just the fact that the feature shouldn't have even been there in the first place. Again, I simply brushed it aside, figuring it was already a feature that just unlocked after I connected to the cameras or something. The photos themselves were always pretty normal, with the most interesting ones being when a deer, rabbit, or stray cat found itself in our yard. Everything was fine, everything was normal. Until this morning. I woke up earlier than normal. I felt oddly tired, despite a full night's rest, but I chalked it up to the missing hour of sleep. I decided to stay up, seeing as I wasn't doing anything that day, and checked the app. I immediately noticed the first thing that was wrong. On my data graph, it said that I hadn't snored at all throughout the night. As mentioned before, I snore a lot, and quite loudly too. I figured it must have been a microphone error, and moved on to the audio section. Instead of the usual 2-hour interval, these ones were only 5 minutes apart. I clicked on the first one. Nothing. No noise came through in the video. Not a breath. Not a movement. It was dead silent. Why did it capture this? Was my mic broken? I clicked on the second one. I heard myself breathing into the phone, so I knew my mic wasn't disabled. As I listened, I couldn't help but feel like something was very wrong with the audio. I replayed it and strained my ears. I felt like my stomach had just fallen out of my body. I heard it, just barely audible over my own breaths. There were other breaths being taken by something else in the room. They were sharp, ragged breaths, with no pattern to them. I was sweating. What the fuck else could have been in here? My parents slept in their own room downstairs, and had never sleepwalked before, so it couldn't have been them. Was it a burglar? Did someone break in? Why were they just standing in my room? I clicked the third one. I heard what sounded like shuffling on my carpet, like if I were to drag a plastic bin across the floor, followed by a few creaks and bumps. It was disturbing to listen to, with the context of what I'd just heard, but I had no clue what I was hearing. I still had a pit in my stomach as I pressed onto the photos. Even from the thumbnails, I could tell something was seriously wrong. Each thumbnail was just a black square, with no preview of what awaited me when I clicked on the images. I viewed the first photo, and I wanted to cry. I felt nauseous at the sight before me. Standing in my backyard was this creature. There's no other word to describe it. Based on how tall it was against our fence, it was easily over 6 feet tall. It was skeletally thin, but no bones pushed through its taut skin. No elbows, no knees, no rib cage, no spine, nothing. It was completely smooth. Its proportions were all wrong. Most of its height was derived from its torso and neck. The midriff of the thing was impossibly long, with a neck twice the length of a human. Its arms stretched down to its knees, with spindly fingers that reached to its calves. The worst part about it was its face, or lack thereof. It had no facial features, not even eye sockets or a mouth. It looked like someone took a mannequin head and stretched skin around it. It stood upright, seemingly reaching toward the front door. I clicked to the kitchen. The front door was wide open, which should have been impossible. My dad locks and deadbolts the front door every night, so there was no way the thing could have opened it. It stood in the middle of the kitchen, holding on to the counter, seemingly for balance. Its head was turned toward the doorway at a degree that would be impossible for a person. I clicked to the dining room. It was uncomfortably close to the camera, already at the living room doorway by the time the photo was taken. Only its head was visible in the frame. I clicked to the living room, and I was horrified by what I saw. My living room is a relatively tight squeeze, with the couch and TV on opposite ends of the room, with a coffee table taking up most of the space in between. The thing was splayed out like a spider, crawling across the couch, its grotesque arms reaching towards the arm of the couch. Its knees were bent the wrong way, not to the point that they looked backwards, but far more than should be attainable by a human. I held my breath as I knew what the next cam was. I clicked to my parents' room. I let out a long sigh of relief when I saw that everything was normal there, my mom and dad peacefully sleeping, no creature visible in frame. I lingered there, happy to see a normal photo in this nightmare. I clicked to the stairs, and any sense of joy I had was torn away. It was still positioned like it was on the couch, crawling up the stairs, about halfway there in the photo. Its arms now looked like its knees, bent the opposite direction at the elbow, or at least where its elbow would be. I felt lightheaded as I realized where it was going. I clicked to the upstairs hallway. The upstairs has a lower ceiling than the downstairs, not even being 6 feet up. The thing was bent at an ungodly angle and looked like someone snapped it in half. It was grasping toward my doorknob, and I felt a knot in my chest. My mind flashed back to that horrible breathing at my bed. How was that even possible? This thing had no face. How was it breathing? I then remembered that third sample, the creaking. The creaking. The sound of something sliding on carpet, and the creaking of the bed. The sound of this thing bending and twisting onto the floor and dragging itself. Under my bed, where it probably was right now. I felt sick. I sat there, huddled in my blanket. I was like a little kid, scared of the boogeyman under the bed and hiding under my covers. But this wasn't an irrational little kid fear. I had 6 photos and 2 audio samples proving that this was a very real fear. I was breathing heavily and felt like I was going to pass out. Was it there? What should I do? If I stay in bed, it might crawl out. If I get up and run, it might grab me or give chase. I decided that laying there was the wrong choice. I built up my courage, mustering all the strength left in my fear-ridden body. Clenching my eyes, I took a breath and bolted toward my door. Nothing happened. I turned my head to my room and didn't see it. I ran downstairs and into the kitchen. My mom was standing there. She asked me why I was so panicked and what had happened. I explained the audio and photos, and even showed her a few to prove that I wasn't bullshitting. She thought I was pulling some sort of prank, and checked the cameras herself. I saw her look of mild amusement vanish, and her face turn white. I explained how I had downloaded the app, and the random unexplained features, and how I felt drained this morning and looked through everything. She grabbed her keys, phone, and wallet before we got into the car. As we drove, she called my dad and explained what was happening, and he, of course, didn't believe her. She told him to check the cameras and to meet her at the hotel near our house before hanging up. As we passed the house, I looked into my window and could have sworn I saw its fleshy hand pressed against the glass. I'm currently in a hotel room with my parents. We don't know what to do at this point. We sent the photos and audio to the police, and they said they'd search the house, but they said there was nothing. Just a few minutes ago, the app sent me a notification. I clicked on it, and it was an image of the outside of the hotel. I didn't even look through the photo. I knew what I'd find. I tried to find the apps page on the App Store, and it's gone. I don't know what'll happen tonight. I don't want to fall asleep, but I know I'll have to sooner or later. I wrote this as a warning, to make my fate worth something in the end. So please, for the love of God, don't make my mistake. It scratches at the door now. My parents are asleep. My eyelids grow heavy. I hear it open the door. My eyes close. I hear the shallow breaths. I slip into sleep. I hear its flesh as it reaches forward. Death shall set me free. Everyone always talks about the black-eyed children, but people rarely talk about the green-eyed kids. Don't misunderstand me. When I say green, I don't mean simply their iris bears hues of hazel, seafoam, or jade. No, their eyes possess no natural greenish tint. You see, they have these eyes, unlike anything you've ever seen before. They shine luminous green, like fireflies. That's how my grandpa described them in all his stories. Whenever they'd appear, you see them first, those funny glowing orbs, moving in the darkness of night. Like two fireflies dancing a parallel dance, side by side. Only those lights, they aren't bugs, and the dance is not for them but for you and I. To lure us closer, draw us further into the dark, away from our friends, from the safety of our homes and beds. That's what Grandpa used to say, in his old smoker's croak. I didn't believe him, of course. Like all children, I thought I knew it all, and he was simply trying to stoke some primitive fear in me, to get me to come home before dark, not stay up too late and do as I was told. But that all changed when he told me what they did to him. So let me cast you back to my childhood years. I was about to storm out after an argument, when he forbade me from leaving. He declared it wasn't safe for me to be going out, not at the late hour that it was. When I pressed him on what he meant, he seemed hesitant to respond fully and truthfully. Instead, he just kept stating it was too late. But when I pulled open the door, he shouted something that I will never forget. "Don't you go out there, those things are out there," he wheezed, his voice gravelly and grave in tone. I slowly closed the door and turned to face him, my worried eyes wordlessly pulling the next response from him. With a deep sigh, he said it was time. Time for what I wondered. Time to grow up I had imagined. Time for me to get out from under him, to escape a life shackled to a kitchen sink or vacuum cleaner. It wasn't time for those things. It was time for me to know. Looking around himself, as if worried someone might catch him talking about things he shouldn't, he aimed a finger toward me, coiling it up and gesturing me closer. Obligingly, I did as my grandfather wished and edged closer and closer, so that his whispering voice might find my ears. "Those things, those green-eyed kids will be out there," he warned, his voice shaking as though throttled by anxiety. "There's no such thing," I snapped. I told him his stories didn't scare me anymore, that he was full of it and I knew better. I didn't believe in Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, or made-up green-eyed boogeymen. And though I'm not proud to admit, I told him he was just an old drunk who didn't want to be left alone. He didn't raise his voice. I think that was the worst part. There wasn't a shred of anger in his face, not even frustration. No, instead of roaring back at me, he just shambled his way back to the comfort of his rat-bitten armchair and cracked open another can. With a swig from the can and a quick puff on his cigarette, he spoke. "Lad, I've got something to show you. And if you see it and you still want to leave, then you can go," Grandpa promised. I tried to mask my confusion and the slight worry building within me with a cocky response. "Fine then," I snarkily spoke. Once I was sat in front of him, he took a deep breath in and then another gulp of his beer. His eyes weren't on me. They seemed unable to look at me as he spoke, but I could see beneath the flickering flames from the fireplace. They were swimming with genuine anxiety. "I'm not lying to you, lad," Grandpa began, only to pause, his lip quivering with worry. "Grandpa," I spoke, attempting to snap him out of his pause. "As I said, lad, I ain't lying to you. I've got the proof right here," he said, lifting his jumper to reveal a sickled scar. Curving upward from navel to nipple, it ran up the length of his torso, starting off thick and shimmery, narrowing the higher the silver trail got. It was truly a terrible sight, and a wound that undoubtedly was horrific. There was a moment of silence between us. My voice, which at that time rarely struggled to make itself heard, had been stolen from me. The moment I saw that nasty scar carved upon my grandpa's body, I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. I guess my grandpa saw I was startled, and so covered his old wound up once more and spoke. This is nothing compared to what they did to little Benny Palmer," my grandpa declared, before drawing in another puff of smoke from his cigarette. Still I had no voice. A smothering atmosphere haunted the spaces between our conversations, and I didn't know what to say, mostly because after seeing that scar, what was once worry had turned to fear. A dreadful fear which clung to me with ever-tightening coils. I knew if I didn't say something soon, I'd lose the ability altogether. So I summoned up the courage and asked him, "So what did happen to little Benny Palmer?" I questioned. I stumbled over each word with a growing dread, barely managing to speak. I don't know why I asked. I should have known it would bring no comfort, but curiosity has always been mankind's greatest flaw. We never cease to trundle towards harm and self-destruction in the pursuit of knowledge, whys and what-ifs. Perhaps I was just hoping that knowing would lessen the frightful images and scenes my mind had begun to conjure within the dark spaces. When I was around your age, there was this lad, Benny Palmer. Folk used to say he was simple, less kind folk used to say crueler things, and a few actively made that poor boy's life hell. He didn't have many friends. But little Benny found a sort of peace away from the nastiness of the world. You see, he loved nothing more than to go down to the creek to catch fireflies at night. Grandpa wheezed. pausing only for a moment to draw another puff from his cigarette before continuing. Folks told him not to, warned him it was dangerous, but every warm summer night he'd go down to the water's edge to catch those little glowing things. Catching stars, he called it. A teary tone welled in the old man, and I saw a side to my grandfather I had never seen before. He'd always been a bit quirky, but he was the town drunk, the town fool in fact, so quirky was to be expected. However, what I saw in those aged eyes was a truly mournful sense of loss, and behind even that, a fearful despair. "Grandpa, are you all right?" I asked. "Aye, lad, sorry about that. Where was I?" "Oh, right, little Benny," the old man rambled, before finding his footing within his own story once more. "One night little Benny Palmer goes out, jar in hand, as he had done many times before. However, this night things take a turn. Hours pass. It's getting late. His mother gets to worrying. She's wringing her hands as his father paces around the room, and then some more hours pass. Now the worries really start, and they got the sheriff out. He was a friend of theirs, you see, so like any friend, he assures them it'll be fine, that little Benny Palmer will walk through that door at any minute. Except he don't. He don't come back at all. Folks were panicking, and pretty soon the whole neighborhood was up and mobilized. Whole families out searching for him. Even those less kind folk, and the ones who made his life miserable, were out. They don't find him, though. Don't find any trace of him. Save one thing. Only his jar. It was down by river, nestled amongst the reeds and roots of an old tree. It even still had a couple of glow bugs rattling inside it, but no Benny. That smothering atmosphere fell upon us once more, hanging there, choking us both for a while. I'm not certain when I decided, whether it was after the reveal of the scar or the story, or whether my reasoning was prompted by the strangely hushed and certain way my grandfather told it. But I had decided to remain with him that night. Any thought I had to abandon him and join my friends on their bike rides in the dark faded like the dimming of a dying firefly. We didn't speak much after the story concluded. My grandfather's attention had turned back to his favorite thing in the world, booze. And in a matter of hours he had fallen asleep, drunk in front of the television. So with no one else to help, I got him up and helped carry him towards the stairs. He didn't like being woken up, and proceeded to fight me every step we took up the stairs. On more than one occasion he thought I was an old poker pal of his and threatened me, slurred some swear words in my direction for my earlier comments, but despite all that, I made sure he got into bed. "Love you, kid." He spoke, his words dizzily accented, but the meaning behind them was sincere. "Love you too, old man," I said, before closing the door. With him turned on his side and tucked up, I went back downstairs. In no time I got to work, tidying up the cans and emptying the ash from the glass tray in which it sat. And only once everything was cleaned up did I get myself off to bed. But my mind was still rattling with the story he had told me, and as I lay there in the spare room, my eyes dared not shut. I lay awake, praying I didn't meet the same fate as Benny Palmer. Once daylight peered through the dusty old windows of that spare room, I was off. I did not wait for my hungover grandfather to stir from his pit. I knew he wouldn't for many hours, and I had things to do. Bolting down the streets on my bike, and over the bridge, it didn't take me long to get home, and once I rushed to my mother in the kitchen. She was washing the dishes and didn't seem interested in talking, but still I recited what Grandpa told me and sat at the table, eager to see her reaction. Only when I told my mother about the scar and the story, she laughed it off. The following Sunday, when I next paid Grandpa a visit, I was ready. now armed with the truth to counter his stupid stories. I didn't wait long to unleash this newfound knowledge upon him. The moment he opened his door, I started. I told him what my mother said, shouted how he got the injury from falling into a glass table when he got drunk one night, and that none of it was real, not the monstrous green-eyed kids or anything else he tried to fill my head with. He got angry then, more angry than I'd ever seen him before. He grabbed my shoulders, shook me hard, and slammed me against the wall of the passageway. So tight was his grip, I actually thought his nails might puncture my skin. Then, with his eyes wide, bloodshot, and staring starkly into mine, he began to yell. "No table did this to me, boy. They did. I followed them damn lights into the dark, and I nearly didn't come back out of it," he slurred. "Even now it stings. Even now I hear them, laughing as they rip and tear. Why do you think I drink in the first place? It's the only way to get those hellish things to shut up." I called him crazy, accused him of always wanting me to stay, to care for him because no one else would. I said some terrible things, and he never did so in kind. Instead, he simply turned to me as I walked out the door and said one last time, "Don't go out at night, and if you do, if you see those lights, even if you don't believe me, you run, lad. Run in the opposite direction. You run like your life depends on it," he begged, in a deflated and pitiful voice. "I'm going," I replied in a coldness I didn't know I possessed, until that day. His words didn't stay me this time. Instead, I just kept on walking, with his voice calling out from behind me. Over and over he kept shouting, "Promise me you won't follow them. Promise me," my grandpa yelled. Sending his voice after me like a pack of rabid dogs, it chased after me, hounded me down the street, but I never turned back. Feeling betrayed and tricked, I didn't go see my grandfather again, not for some time, and by the time I was ready to go back, having missed his old scary stories and the way we'd butt heads over the simplest of things, it was too late. He was hospitalized with pneumonia, and I never got to hear another of his stupid green-eyed kid stories. I thought the tales would die with him, but if that was the case, then I would not be here typing this out. So, as you might now suspect, I too came to encounter them. Those green-eyed kids, and like my grandfather before me, I am lucky to be alive. This is my story. Summer in the 70s was amazing if you were a kid. Ice cream sundaes, swimming in the river, camping out beneath the stars, and long hot days that seemed like they'd last forever. Days you didn't want to end, and so you'd stay out as late as you possibly could, stretch out the hours, just to make sure they didn't end too soon. One night, however, everything changed. Not for the world, not for any other kid in town, just for me. The hazy daydream of those simpler times vanished on this one, most terrible night. I was riding back from Campfire Hill, a local spot where teenagers go to have a campfire and tell scary stories. The tradition goes back ages, since the town was founded apparently. Chasing away the ghosts, that's what they used to call it. Tell a scary story and chase away the ghosts. If only it was that simple. With the clarity of cut glass, I can still see it all. My skinny, awkward teenage body sat atop the bicycle my parents bought me the previous Christmas. I can hear the whirling of my bike tires, smell the trees at either side of me, and hear the buzzing streetlights which had come on long before I began my way down the hill. With halogen luminescence, they lit up the road ahead as though it were a runway for a plane to take off. The speed I was going, though brisk, it felt like flying. Do you remember that feeling, the wind rushing past you, over you and through your hair as your legs pedaled faster and faster? I can still feel the cold night air on my face, Remember its soft touch as my tires began down the road, slowing only to wind round the corners and curbs. There was no sign of anyone else following behind me from the group. I presumed they must still all be up there drinking, partying, and doing other stuff, of course. The world was not yet awake. It was a time when even angels and stars slept. And I, a lone teenager mounted atop my cycle, felt like the only person in the whole universe. As such, I slowed my pace, enjoying the sights of the ghost town, only stopping, just for a moment, to take in the fresh woodland air and observe the emptiness ahead. A smile appeared on my face as I found myself remembering how earlier that night I had found the courage to steal a secret kiss behind a tree with Betty Delaney. No one else knew, just her and I. Our secret, she had said after breaking her lips away from mine. We had spent the night giving each other little knowing glances and smirks over the fire, as the other conjured forth monsters and maniacs in stories. Yet as my thoughts dallied in the days of love's young dream, I had lingered a little too long alone on that road. I remember noticing it was quiet, though not in a frightening way, just quiet. Not a sound to suggest anyone was around. It truly must late, I told myself. Swiftly the next thought to enter my head was I really should get going, but just before I got back to pedaling, that calm silence broke. There was movement, the snapping of a dried twig, a rush of silhouettes darting behind the trees to the left of me. Dear, I thought, it had to be. That's what I told myself. They were common in these parts. I was sure I had simply startled them. However, again it happened. The minute I turned my back and pressed my foot onto the pedals, ready to ride off, there was movement, the crunching of leaves, and for a second I swore I heard whispering. Focusing my eyes towards the tree-line, I searched for any sign, any shape, yet I saw nothing. When I turned away again, I heard it. Unmistakable, childish shushing. "Ha ha, guys, very funny," I yelled, before pedaling off. Still to this day, I can't say if I truly believed it was my friends simply trying to frighten me, or whether I was just trying to convince myself it was them, in a foolish attempt to reassure myself that there was no such thing as monsters. Down the tarmac I pedaled, a gentle ride. There was no cars on the road, not a solitary soul out, and the lights were all illuminating everything, so I had little to fear and less to speed away from. That's what I thought at least. Yet when I rounded the corner into Baker Street, unlike the rest of the town, the street's lights weren't working for some reason. The scene was certainly a little spooky, but I figured if I just rode hard and fast, I could be through the street without having enough time to worry about what might be in the dark. My pause for concern was a little justified. 3 of the 6 houses on that row were empty, with a 4th one being unoccupied due to it being in the process of reconstruction. The only 2 with residents were home to Old Man Wickles, who lost his hearing in the war, though which war is anyone's guess, and the Bell family home, who were currently on vacation. I say vacation, as that's the official story, but everyone knows they left to go on some retreat after their eldest ran off. With all that in mind, you can understand my hesitation, for if anything was to happen to me, who would hear me scream? I doubt Old Man Wickles would come to my rescue even if he did hear me call out for help. Despite all my reservations, I also knew that the quickest way to the bridge, and therefore home, was via a short corridor that ran between the end house and the river. With some internal encouragement and silent hyping, I convinced myself I was brave enough to do it. Yet no sooner had I begun to pedal, I heard something. I couldn't be sure at first that it wasn't just my mind playing tricks, but I could have sworn I heard someone giggling. Then it came again, the same giggling, girly and light, not sinister and mostly hushed. I looked around as I rode, but couldn't see a thing. Then it happened again, another giggle, this time followed by someone else shushing them. Again it was childish and light, in no way intentionally frightening, but still it gave me the shivers. Almost as if despite the fact they tried to mask it with whimsy and gentler tones, my brain, my body sensed the true nature of the giggles was anything but. Rushing through, my eyes were too busy looking for any and all potential threats. That's how I missed the curb. With a stuttering series of thumps, my tire hit the sidewalk at an awkward angle and caused me to go flying head first over my handlebars. Luckily, my fall was somewhat cushioned by the soft green grass outside the Bell's empty house. "Shush, he'll see us," a little voice, boyish and young, chirped from the shadows. "Who's there?" I asked, my eyes looking to the gloomy alley beside me, the one that ran beside the houses. I expected to see some unsavory type stumble round the white fence posts that stood between the river and the end of the house, but no such figure emerged. "Over here." Another small child spoke. This one was like that of a little girl. Ahead of me was the river. I couldn't see anything. Then they emerged, those small green glowing droplets in the sea of darkness. They danced around the tree, and the moment they did, all those stories my grandpa told me immediately came crashing back into my mind. I almost couldn't breathe. I knew I couldn't move. Even though the fall from my bike had not damaged me, I knew my legs would not shift for fear of those glittering things. Beating drums drummed in my ears as my heart thundered ever quicker in its cage. I definitely recall thinking I was going to die, if not at the hands of glowing-eyed monsters, then of fright. That was until they spoke again. "We've been catching fireflies. Do you want to help?" A little girl spoke. I still couldn't quite see them until they stepped out from the shade of the tree on the bank. They were small, 2 of them. Judging from their voices, one was a boy, the other a girl, neither older than 10. But that was all I could make out. After chastising myself silently for believing they were monsters and those lights were anything other than plain old fireflies, I got up from the ground and raised my bicycle. "All right, well, just be careful. It's pretty late and you should probably get yourselves off home," I said, knowing fine well those words were also for me. For despite telling myself that I was simply letting silly childish fears and ghost stories get the better of me, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that was still growing inside me. "Could you walk us home?" the boy asked. Almost immediately I responded, replying quicker than I probably should have, for I had not even given it a thought. "No, I can't, I'm sorry," I stated, sharply and firmly. I don't know why, but I didn't like the gleeful way he asked me to walk him home. There was something in his voice, behind the words. Something ominous. "That's a shame." "Never mind," he exclaimed. They just stood there in the dark, beneath the gentle swaying of the tree branches. The glow bugs had vanished. I couldn't recall when they disappeared for certain, though a part of me believed it happened the moment those 2 appeared. Odd for sure, alarming a little, but I was older than them, stronger, and I had a bike. These were the things I told myself. Strange looking back. Why would I need to reassure myself if there was nothing to fear? I know now that it's because there was something else guiding me that night. Something in the air. A feeling, no, not a feeling. A tension, an unnatural tension. And it seeped out from them. From those 2 strange children, playing the dark by the reeds and the roots of the tree. I felt, even though I couldn't see them, that their eyes were on me, fixed on me. And I knew, although again they were hidden in shadows, that their faces were smiling. No veil, no matter how black and how obscuring, could hide their amusement. "You run along home then," The boy sniggered alongside the little girl, who giggled. It was apparent they were not only aware of fear, but appeared to be enjoying the moment of dread they had caused and could barely contain their laughter. A little disturbed, I got back on my bike, began to ride down the riverside path, back home. My heart thumped a little faster with every push of the pedal. Every time my feet felt tired or I went to slow down my pace, I remembered little Benny Palmer down by the water's edge, and almost immediately I'd pedal faster. Wind whipped past me, furiously pulling through my long brown hair, and it wasn't long before those odd kids had been blown to the back of my thoughts. Again I told myself to grow up, and in my mind beat myself up for almost thinking my grandpa's tales were all true. Boogeymen are just a tool, a parent's greatest tool to get us to behave. There were no such things as monsters, I told myself over and over like mantra. A protective chant to ward off the nightmares and the scary intrusive thoughts that chased after me. Before I knew it, I was almost there, just little ways from home. All I had to do was cross a small bridge and I was there. Feeling safer, I slowly made my way across the bridge, easing my pace with each passing moment. The sound of running water beneath me easing my worries and returning me to how I felt when I came down from Campfire Hill. Once more I began to take in the tranquil sights, hoping they may soften the beating in my chest. As I was crossing, though, I stopped, my gaze having glimpsed some more fireflies. They buzzed up from below the bridge and through the reeds. They were everywhere, a whole swarm, elegantly gliding the riverbanks, flying through the air almost entirely invisible save for the glow at the end of their bodies. Truly fantastic display of light, one that was almost hypnotic. It certainly held my focus. My eyes followed some as they climbed over the bridge and danced in the dark ahead. I hadn't even noticed that the street lamps nearby had seemingly went out. I should have wondered when that happened, but my focus was still on those small green lights. As if summoned by the situation, I heard my grandpa's words in my head. If you see those things, you run in the opposite direction. Almost instantly my mind snapped back into my body and I realized some of those dazzling lights weren't moving like the others. Some of the pairs seemed to move in perfect synchronicity, side by side, parallel. Almost as if they were eyes, I thought. Panic pressed into my chest as one pair floated closer, with another 2 pairs following close behind them and another 3 lingering in the background. All of them, all of those twinkling emeralds, came to a perfect stop. They weren't fireflies at all. "Hey, mister, would you walk us home?" A small girl spoke. It was the same girl from before. How did she get here so quick, I wondered. Though they had at first been shrouded by the darkness at the end of the bridge, the lamp post on the bridge was shining slightly on them. I could see her now. Pale grayish, the shade of black and white television, that was the tone of her skin and clothing. Her eyes, each of them darkened, haunted pits, with a blackness illuminated only by the tiniest glimmers of green light. Her clothes were made of odd materials and designed in frilly styles that would seem to all normal people to be old-fashioned and almost doll-like. The 2 behind her were a pair of boys, both colored in shades of gray and apparelled in the same old-timey, out-of-place clothing. Neither of them looked any older than 10 or 11. It was as if they had jumped straight out of a black and white western, save for those eyes, which despite being predominantly black, held tiny green lights within them. Lights which they seemingly could make larger and brighter at will, for they had certainly shrunk and hidden themselves when I first encountered them. The other 3 behind them did not step forward, so their forms remained hidden, but I knew by the placement of their glowing eyes that they were taller than the other children in front. "Hey, want to come catch some fireflies?" one of the boys said, his lips black and curling into a smile. No, I stumbled, my voice almost failing to emerge. Even without their appearance, I could feel the threatening hiss within his voice. Come on, we know this really neat spot. Beneath the bridge, in the dark, the gray boy smirked. With each word that he spoke, a thick inky black substance spat and dribbled out from between his lips. There's other stuff down there too, all kinds of neat things. We can show you if you like. This time I didn't reply, I just shook my head, eyes wide with fear and ready to cry. My grandpa was right. I should have listened, I thought. With dread pinning me, I thought I might die, but then something pushed my feet and I found the pedals. I readied myself to ride away, but he spoke again. If you want come, maybe we will just have to drag you down there ourselves, he declared as he grinned. This time, his smile and all their smiles stretched far and wide, ear to ear, displaying their grisly gums and their three-rowed maws stuffed with diseased narrow fangs. They clasped countless cavity-riddled corn-colored fangs close together, each tooth tightly packed into a garish grin, one that greedily hungered for me. Wild like beasts, they rushed, their eyes gleaming in the dark like wicked gemstones. My feet spun the pedals like never before, my hands firmly wrapped to the handlebars as tires tore through the night. Yet even still they were all around me, a swarm of gray shadows and green lights, whose glowing trails streamed off at great speeds. All the time, they heckled and giggled, as though they were a pack of monstrous hyena hungry for my skin and bones. They bit the air and laughed at my screams and yells for help that went unanswered. All around me they came, clawing, rasping and gnashing, jetting inky saliva across my face as I raced between their limbs and faces. Pain swiped across my arm, and I thought for a second I might lose my balance and come crashing down to the ground like some helpless gazelle. Something was with me though, luck or perhaps my grandpa, I don't know. It had been with me all night, helping me, pushing me, and though I don't know what force aided me, I know it is the thing that gave me the strength to keep on riding and stay true to my course. The attack did not deter my feet, nor cause me to swerve. I continued to pound forward, my feet never missing the pedals, until I was at the foot of my house. I don't know when they stopped following me, but by the time my bike mounted the porch steps and the front light came on, they were gone from all sides of me. Not that I stopped to check, for the minute I was at the edge of my only sanctuary, I threw the door open and slammed it shut behind me. Locked and bolted, the door was secure, but still I did not feel entirely safe. For a while I sat there, pressing hard against the door out of the fear they might yet continue the hunt and break it down to get to me. But to my infinite relief they did no such thing. I don't know why they didn't. Maybe like vampires they can't enter uninvited. And I know you may doubt me. I know most people would question their sanity, question everything, but I didn't need to. For you see, they left me with a reminder, a memento, which declared that they were most definitely not just an old drunk's scary story. For on my arm was a deep curved slash, from wrist to elbow, the narrowing pattern of which I had seen before. Though mine was not nearly as long nor deep, the cut was sickled and identical to the one that scarred my grandfather's torso. Now I tell my grandchildren stories, the same kind as the ones my grandpa told me. And though I never encountered the green-eyed children again, I often think about them. On nights, when I'm alone, when all the lights go out, I wonder if they are still out there, playing in the shadows, giggling in the dark. Sometimes I even sight of the occasional firefly or two from out my bedroom window and wonder if it's them. If they are still out there, I hope you never find out. Have a good night, sweetie. We'll be back after midnight, my mom said. Don't forget we left extra candy in the basement in case you run out. I know, you told me like 6 times. Just go. Have fun, I'll be fine. They gave me one last worried look. As a 15-year-old, I had only been left home alone on rare occasions. My dad was giving me a distrustful sideways glance, as if he didn't believe in my ability to remember basic instructions. Reluctantly, they began to descend the front steps and walk towards the car wearing their couple's grease costumes. They were going to a Halloween party, which made what my dad said next slightly ironic. Okay, we're going. Remember, no parties, no girls, no drinking or drugs. Do lots of drugs, have unprotected sex, invite people over and get drunk. Okay, got it. Thanks. I shut the door behind them and was left alone. Mercifully, finally, peacefully alone. If you've ever been 15 years old, maybe you'll remember that wonderful feeling when your parents finally go out for the night and leave you alone to your own devices. It's magical. The sun had recently set and it was dark outside on the moonless night. Trick-or-treaters would be out soon, coming to the door in droves. It was my first night handing out candy, and I made sure to turn the porch light on so kids knew it was all right to come to the door. It was kind of exciting to be on this side of things for a change. I could eat as much candy as I wanted all night long while watching scary movies and playing video games. I had several horror flicks on my Netflix playlist ready to go. I tried to decide what to watch first, The Babysitter, Scary Movie, or The Ring. The night was still young, and I decided I didn't feel like committing to a movie just yet. So I sat down in my dad's comfortable faux leather recliner with a bowl of Halloween candy in my lap and pulled out my phone. I figured I'd watch a few TikToks, then pick a movie after that. I opened the app with one finger while nimbly unwrapping a Reese cup with my remaining digits. The video which popped up on my feed was dark, difficult to make out. It looked like the person recording it was in a forest. Then I saw concrete stairs and the familiar-looking wooden boards of a deck or a porch. I almost scrolled past it, but then noticed the deck looked familiar, as did the front door in the video. I paused the clip. The Reese's cup remained uneaten in my hand. I put it up to my lips to take a bite, thinking the kids outside could wait a minute. I got up from my chair, the piece of candy still whole, and stalked angrily to the door. Damn kids, couldn't just wait a minute. They'd break the doorbell if they kept attacking it like that. Swinging open the door, ready to yell at the brats, I looked down to see. There was absolutely nobody there. Glancing around, I saw there were no trick-or-treaters anywhere nearby. No other houses were decorated either, I noticed for the first time. Mine was the only one. And it was pitch black outside now, I noticed. The porch light had apparently burnt out within the last few minutes, since it had just been working when I saw my parents off for the night. I closed the door and walked back to the recliner, my heartbeat now ticking just a little faster in my chest. Sitting down, I felt like I couldn't relax. My muscles were tense and stiff. A floorboard creaked above me from the second floor, and I jumped, then told myself I was being foolish. It was probably just kids outside playing tricks. I leaned back in the recliner and tried to breathe. We had moved into the house that summer, and it still felt strange and new to me. I had to get used to its quirks, the wheezing, moaning noises it made in the dead of night, sounding ghostly and possessed. The whistling eaves and rattling shutters which sealed off the attic, sounding like bones shaking in the wind sometimes, or like muffled screams. Holding my phone in my hand again, I unpaused the TikTok I had been watching. It had been close to the end of the video. The camera panned upwards, and I saw the person raising a black-gloved finger up to press a doorbell. Ding dong! Ding dong! The familiar sound rang out through my cell phone speakers. In the video, nobody came to the door. They began to press the bell again and again and again. Faster and faster and faster. It was too similar for me not to notice the coincidence. It sounded like what had happened at my own front door just moments before, although it was possible I was mistaken. Looking down at the bottom left of the screen, I saw it was a user who was unknown to me. The title of the video was Halloween Takeover. It had just been posted a couple minutes before. Another creaking noise could be heard above me, from the second floor, this time sounding more distinctly like footsteps bending the squeaky wooden floorboards. My heart began to pound faster and harder. I could feel it in my jugular and in my temple. My throat and mouth were dry, and I felt anxious and panicked, more and more with each passing second. With a trembling finger, I scrolled up on my TikTok feed, getting rid of the video and moving on to something else, anything else. It had just been a coincidence, nothing more. I refused to acknowledge the possibility of it being something more sinister. That was next to impossible. The following video was a live feed, I noticed. Had the previous one been as well? I wasn't sure. It seemed highly possible that it could have been, and I just hadn't noticed. As it played, I noticed the familiar look of the person recording, looking at their black-shoed feet and the shadowy grass. Then suddenly they were standing on the stone tile porch at someone's back door. Someone else's house, I hoped, holding my breath. But those stone tiles looked very familiar, just like the wooden deck in the previous video had. This time there was no doorbell, so they knocked with a heavy fist. Jumping up from my seat, I heard the sound coming from my back door a few moments before I heard it on the app, as if there was a slight delay as it traveled through the cellular network. There was no doubting it. They were at my back door. The same person who was recording the TikTok was outside my house. Feeling suddenly full of righteous indignation, I ran to the back door to give the asshole a piece of my mind. It was probably some punk kid from my school, trying to mess with me. I was pissed off they had gotten me so good. Swinging open the back door with a stinging retort ready on my lips, I looked outside into the night and saw, once again, there was nobody there. I stepped out in my bare feet, walking onto the grass and looking around for the person responsible. The door hung open behind me, and I paid no attention to it as I yelled out into the night. "Hey, I know what you're doing. You don't scare me, asshole. Come and get me." That last statement was one I would come to regret. Going back inside, I closed the door and locked it behind me. From where I stood, the stairs to the basement were just to the right, the stairs to the main floor straight ahead. The darkness down to my right teased me with its unknown horrors and the possibilities of what lurked within it, drenched in blackness as it was, but I ignored it and went up to the main floor, shuddering and closing the basement door behind me as quickly as I possibly could, feeling as if something would grab my ankle with a cold hand if I lingered for too long. There was a flimsy steel chain lock on the door separating the main floor from the rear exit and from the cold dampness of the basement. We never used it, but this time I slotted it into position with my hands shaking badly. At least it would offer a modicum of security. But from what? That I still didn't know. It was beginning to occur to me that it wasn't necessarily a kid from my class doing this. It could be anyone. It could be a murderer. My knees buckled slightly as that thought crossed my mind. I went back to the living room and took a deep breath before sitting back down in the recliner. Holding the phone in my hands, I debated calling my parents. I thought about how it would sound if I did. Hey Mom, I was on TikTok and I saw a scary video and they rang the doorbell in the video and then our doorbell rang a second later and there was nobody there and then somebody knocked at the back door and there was nobody there. It sounded delusional and paranoid. They would come home and she would say to my dad, "I guess you were right. He really wasn't ready to be home alone by himself. Maybe next year." There was no way I was going to let that happen. Whoever it was, I could handle them. Getting up, I went down the hall to my room to grab my baseball bat. As soon as I got there and had it in my hands, the lights went out. The entire house was suddenly completely dark, eerily quiet, lacking all machine noise. And of course I had left my cell phone in the living room. With the bat in my hand, I started to feel my way along the wall, finding the doorway and going out of the room into the hallway. The entire house was quiet, dark and empty as far as I could tell. But then why did I keep hearing the soft squeak of footsteps above me, coming from the second floor? That decided it for me. I was going to call the police as soon as I got back to my phone. Slowly moving through the blackened space, I felt for the edges of the walls until I was in the kitchen, then moved past the locked basement door, feeling a sense of disquiet as I did so, as if there was someone just on the other side. When I was right up against the basement door, I heard the sound of the knob turning and goosebumps ran up my spine and covered my entire body. They were inside the house. The flimsy chain would only hold back just the barest effort, judging by the looks of it. I didn't have much time. Whoever was on the other side of that door was not a kid from my school. I had a very strong feeling about that. They sounded angry and insistent as they turned the door knob back and forth and began to hammer and bang on the door. It rattled and shook in its frame. Running as fast as I could, no longer caring if I hurt myself at this point, I ducked out of the kitchen and over to my seat where I had left my phone. My intention was to grab it and call 911, but I didn't even get that chance. A loud crash echoed through the house, and I heard the sound of footsteps on the second floor, clearly now, running towards the stairs that lead to the ground floor. There was more than one of them in the house. My phone was blinking from where it lay on the recliner's armrest. I ran over to it in the pitch-black darkness, bashing my shin against the leg of a dining chair on the way. I finally reached it and unlocked it, just as I heard the basement door break open with a loud bang. The only thing I could think to do at that moment was to turn on the flashlight. I needed to see what the hell I was dealing with. Luckily, I got it on quickly using a shortcut from the home screen, and it turned on, casting the room in a harsh white light. Walking over to the broken door, I saw there was nobody behind it. No culprit who could have caused the damage. My phone dinged and I looked at the screen to see I had received a text message from someone. It was a link to a TikTok. "Sorry about your door," a voice was saying in the video. It sounded ghostly and ethereal. "Do you have any more candy?" The bag in the basement was mostly Tootsie Rolls and licorice. I hate licorice. My parents opened the door and found me shaking in the recliner, all the lights turned off, staring at my phone, watching that same video over and over again. It was our basement and our candy stash. Really? You sat here all night with the lights off eating candy and watching TikTok on your phone? My mom asked incredulously. "We're gonna have to talk about cutting back on your phone time. I would have thought you would at least give out candy to kids, maybe watch a scary movie or something." My dad sounded a bit upset, but I was barely registering what he was saying. My mom was going down to the basement, I realized with a start. "Mom, don't go down there," I yelled, but it was too late. "Yep, he ate all the candy down here too. You are in so much trouble, mister. I thought you didn't even like Tootsie Rolls." That was the night I learned that ghosts are real, and that once a year on Halloween they return to their earthly homes, to the places where they spent their fondest days. Our family had purchased the house from a couple who was downsizing after their kids passed away in a freak accident on a school trip. The son apparently loved TikTok and playing pranks on people. He also really loved candy, just not licorice, I guess. The daughter usually played upstairs in her room, was quiet, and didn't cause any trouble. Greg and Alice were their names. I found out from my parents, who had found out from the neighbors. They found out some other details too. Other past owners of the house, some more controversial than others. It's not Greg and Alice who keep me up at night on Halloween, terrified to sleep. It's the other one. The one Greg told me about. He stays up in the attic. That's why it was boarded up, he whispered to me in the darkness, after my parents had gone to sleep. I didn't find out how scary he really was until I crossed the veil. I can see him up there, waiting. Just don't ever unlock those doors or open those blinds. All he needs is a little breathing room, and he'll be out of there next Halloween. And you do not want to run into him. There's a reason he was locked up there to begin with. Halloween will be here again soon, in just a couple weeks. And my dad just decided to start renovations on the attic. The shutters are off for the first time in decades, the doors hanging wide open. He did it while I was at school. We've got to let it air out, my dad told me with an unrecognizable grin, looking very much unlike himself. We've got to let it breathe. I didn't have the mental fortitude to tell the rest of this story yesterday. It's the hardest part to tell, but here we go. Sitting on my bed, I put the glasses on again. My blurry world was traded for another, far more frantic one. The stranger was now wrestling Dad Blob, his hate-filled face coming in and out of focus as they broke apart and lunged at each other over and over again. Seeing a break, the stranger ran again for the door and succeeded in exiting the room into the hallway. He rounded the corner toward the stairs, and suddenly everything in my vision was spinning out of control. I felt motion sick, but I clenched my jaw and swallowed back the bile that shot up my throat. The chaos jerked to a stop as the stranger slammed against the front door at the bottom of the stairs. Darkness encroached on the outer corners of my vision. The blurry stairs in front of us became a little blurrier as tears welled up in the stranger's eyes, and cleared a little when those tears finally fell. As the stranger stared forward, motionless, Dad Blob came swiftly into view, running down the stairs before pausing in front of the stranger. Then he disappeared to the left and came back. The stranger's left hand raised feebly towards Dad Blob in a plea for mercy. A taut stretch of duct tape appeared in front of our face, and the stranger was gagged. The hands trying weakly to push Dad away were violently grabbed and wrapped together in a thick ball of duct tape. The feet were treated the same. Dad Blob then disappeared up the stairs to my room. I saw Mom Blob dart toward the front door from the dining room. She had probably been smoking in the garden, as was her habit after a fight with Dad, and had just walked in on the scene. After a short pause to take in the mess, she, too, disappeared quickly up the stairs to make sure little me was okay. A moment later, Mom Blob ran across the hallway to the bedroom to call Uncle Petey from their bedside phone, and hurried back to my room. Dad Blob, in the meantime, had joined us back downstairs and started searching the stranger. I'll never know if the stranger ever made a sound during this entire encounter. Everything I watched was accompanied by silence. I could only hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Dad pulled flyers out of the inside of the stranger's brown corduroy coat and shook them angrily at the stranger. It was the same missing flyer I had seen in the kitchen with my face on it. Now I could read a name, Alex Fields. What the hell? Every pocket was flipped inside out. Something that looked like a bus ticket. There were no keys, some gum, a tissue, and a wallet. Dad Blob must have opened it, because there was a string of photos in our face right now. A man with the same light brown hair and, most importantly, the glasses, the eyes of the stranger. They weren't bloodshot in the photo, but they were unmistakable. This was the man who had given me so many nightmares as a child. He looked so normal, though. I was so intent on his face, I didn't notice the woman he was sat next to, a young blonde woman with hazel eyes, and in her arms she held a baby. Shit, I thought. That's me. Revelations about why my eyesight was so bad when my parents had 20/20th vision, about why my hair hadn't darkened to the brown-black of my father's when I hit puberty just like his had, about why I was rarely left alone my whole life. All of these had barely any time to seed in my mind before another photo came into view. The stranger and his wife looked older now, thinner, with dark circles under their eyes. But now in my place there was a newborn girl, a blue-spotted bow barely grasping a wispy tuft of light hair on her head, bright blue eyes staring at something just off camera. I felt a feeling I had never felt before. I felt replaceable. I didn't know what Dad was saying as he ripped the photos away and seemed to stuff them into a paper grocery bag. My thoughts drifted, and I'm not sure when Uncle Petey arrived. My vision shifted suddenly, and we were pushed to the side a little as Petey Blob opened the front door. Two very animated blobs seemed to have an argument in front of us, and Petey's face knelt into focus. I don't know how to explain it, but I didn't know this version of him existed. My blood ran cold a little. He looked so serious. After the blobs conferred some more, Petey disappeared upstairs, and when he reappeared he grabbed the stranger's feet and started to drag us out the door. At some point, my dad must have picked up the stranger under the arms because my vantage point elevated. I watched as the stranger's legs and torso were swung into my wagon that I used to force Lily to ride in. Pulled backwards, I watched a blurry light from the back porch disappear as we went deeper into the woods behind our house. My vision was jostled as the stranger's head lolled around on the bumpy and uneven territory. There was no moon that night, not that it would have helped. Eventually we stopped. The light of a flashlight shone into my eyes, glinting briefly off something shiny in front of me. I didn't have to question what it was for very long. After being lifted out of the wagon and onto the ground, Petey's smile popped in front of me. But this smile was not his usual smile. It didn't meet his eyes, and it was dark. He moved his head aside to brandish the shining head of an axe. I literally could not look away. Another flashlight on the ground illuminated Dad Blob as he worked at something a couple yards away. Petey disappeared, and then he was right next to Dad Blob, frantically working away at the same spot. They dug for a few hours before they turned around and removed the stranger's clothes, stuffing them into the paper bag. I spotted a white rectangle briefly illuminated in the distance. Petey dropped his shovel beside the stranger's body, and his face was in view one last time. One more smile. He stood up, and the stranger followed him with his eyes. A thin streak of light arched in the air as the shiny axe head came down, and I gasped. Our vision spun down and levitated a few feet, and I watched the pale form of the stranger's headless body get dragged toward the hole before everything faded to black. That's when I vomited. Everything I'd held back was violently sprayed all over my comforter. The glasses slipped off my face, and the sight of the mess in front of me made me spew more. I must have been loud. I could hear Mom walking toward my room now. I hastily grabbed the glasses and threw them behind the bed again. "Honey? Oh my God, are you okay?" Mom Blob rushed toward me. "Where are your glasses?" She looked around and, not seeing them, fumbled for them atop the mattress. "You've always been a wild sleeper." They were apparently in my pillowcase the whole time. I cursed silently in my head. How are moms so good at finding your shit for you? She went to place them on my face, and I winced, not wanting to relive the stranger's demise again. But they were my glasses this time, and I could finally look at my surroundings clearly. She looked worried. "My stomach doesn't feel good." It was the truth. "Can I stay home today?" She looked at the evidence and back at me. She wasn't happy. "I can't stay home with you today. Janet called out this morning, and I have to go into the shop. Your father has an important meeting today. Are you sure you can't go to school?" A short belch told her that was probably a bad idea. "Okay, you can stay home, but stay inside and I'll have Petey come check in on you, all right?" I nodded weakly. Now was not the time to assert that I was old enough to stay home alone. She kissed me on the forehead and gathered up my soiled bedclothes. "When you feel better, you need to clean this place up. How do you walk on these floors?" She left and came back with some water and a plate of saltines. "Be good. Stay inside and call me if there are any issues." One last concerned look and an "I love you," and she was gone. I waited until I heard both of their vehicles leave the driveway before I reached behind the bed to grab the glasses and went to rinse my face, and the gross glasses, off in the bathroom. With good vision now, I inspected the lenses. I didn't know how to feel, looking into the eyes of my dead birth father. What should I think of the parents who raised me, who loved me? What should I think of the father who looked for me? I couldn't process everything. I needed answers. I could tell the eyes wanted me to keep looking. I went to the family computer and Googled Alex Fields. After some scrolling, I found a few articles about it. Alex was an 18-month-old who had been kidnapped from a young couple at a rest stop in a neighboring state about 14 years ago. I investigated further. I found a missing persons report for my birth father and an obituary for my mother dated not long after my father went missing. She had been in a car accident and was survived by a 3-month-old baby girl who would be taken care of by her aunt and uncle. I looked for details of the accident and found an article. She'd actually died nearby, in my county. The story was she swerved into a tree after a deer ran in front of her. A note found in the car indicated she was trying to find her husband who had left her and their infant for his affair partner. That obviously didn't track, unless he was a great multitasker. My blood froze when I read that the first person at the scene was an Officer Peter Showmaker. Petey's dark smile from the vision played in my mind. Was that the last smile she saw? I grabbed my coat and my shoes and left out the back door. I went to the shed to grab a shovel, and I set out into the woods behind the house. I had an idea where I should be going. After a while of walking, the forest cleared and I crossed a dirt county road to our town's sprawling cemetery. Only the original cemetery had a wall around it. As the town grew, so did the graves grow out of the original boundaries. Every 10 years or so, more trees were cleared to make room for the new arrivals. I had always been forbidden to go more than 20 feet into the woods. I always had to be in sight, but I had snuck out to explore the area with friends before. It didn't take me long to find what I was looking for. In the vision, The light flashed across a white rectangle. I arrived in front of the white marble memorial bench and started checking nearby graves for the dates. Eventually, I came across the grave of Myrtle Davis. She died pretty close to the time my birth father had. I apologized and started digging. Sunlight was just starting to fade from the sky by the time I found it. A femur. I dug a little deeper and hit the white veneer of Myrtle's casket. Fuck. I moved to unearth more of my birth father's headless remains when I heard footsteps on the gravel behind me. Timbo. Fuck. What cha doing way out this way? I was almost shoulder deep in the pit. I turned around to meet his polished black boots. My eyes slowly made their way up. It was getting darker, but I knew he was smiling, and not the way I had hoped. He sighed and knelt down. Your mom told me to come check in on ya, but you weren't home. She's worried. He took his hand and rustled my hair, shaking the dirt out of it. I always expect a 16-year-old's Google history to be interesting, but who? You threw me for a loop. Didn't see that coming. And now I find you here. I don't know what kind of fucky business brought you out here, but I gotta tell ya, it doesn't look good for you. His smile had turned into a scowl of disappointment. My sister always deserved better. She was made to be a mother, you know? It was all she ever wanted. She took good care of me when Dad walked out and Mom couldn't handle it anymore. God was cruel to her. But when she showed up with a strange baby screaming in her arms, big smile on her face, it created a lot of problems, but I solved them, because I owed her and she deserved to smile for once, you know. We moved to a different county, changed our names, and built a good life for all of us. I didn't know what to say. Timbo, I can't let you ruin that. How's she gonna be happy if she's looking over her shoulder her whole life? You want your ma to be happy, don't you? I nodded shakily. See, I want to believe you, but here we are. When you go missing, she'll miss you for a while, but I'll find another baby to put in her arms, maybe a little girl this time. Even as I realized what he was saying, I bristled at being replaced. I moved to climb out of the grave, rage and adrenaline fueling me forward, but I wasn't out before that shiny boot hit the back of my head. When I woke up, it was dark. Petey loomed over me. This felt familiar. My mouth was covered in duct tape, and my hands were bound with zip ties. The axe shone in the moonlight. I wondered to myself if my glasses would show this moment to whoever found them, if they survived this night unscathed, because I didn't think I would. The grave had been dug out more, but it'd still be a snug fit. I felt claustrophobic thinking about it, even though I knew I'd be too dead to care. The panic set in. Petey followed my gaze and smiled his terrible smile. No worries, bud. I'll keep patrol so I know you're not disturbed. He went to go grab his axe, and I couldn't watch. I only turned when I heard metal crack against bone. My mother was there. He fell into the open grave, and she jumped in and hit him with the shovel again and again and again. Blood splattered her dress, and she screamed in rage and agony. Her life was ruined. I ruined it. I shouldn't have been out here. I should have been at school today. I should have returned to two happy parents who could not have loved me more. Her baby brother should be alive. I should not have put those glasses on again. Iram. And I've kept running ever since. I never told a soul about what my parents and Petey had done. Petey had gone missing, and my parents had followed suit. They probably have new names and a new life in a different state. I know I do. I hope they're happy. I'm not. I haven't been since before I put those fucking glasses on. I thought about going back to them. I thought about the new kid they probably have, living their happy little life being loved and cared for, and I hated it. I couldn't stand it. But when I showed up at their door, they were gone. They just left me. Life never got easier after that. I thought about linking up with my bio family, but I couldn't stand that either. Andrea has her mom's blonde hair and her dad's cursed blue-gray eyes. She doesn't remember her parents, and she's lived a happy life with our aunt and uncle. She did well in school, got a good career right off the bat, and she's even engaged now. It makes me physically ill. Why did she get such a happy life? Here I am, my life in tatters, recently replaced at my crap job at 30 by some 19-year-old shithead. Maybe it's time she suffered, too. I found her mailing address through her wedding registry. I sent her a little wedding present from Dad. I've held onto those glasses for years. They keep replaying the events of that night in a loop. It can't show me anything else. Sometimes the grim stuff is worth it just to see my parents' faces fighting in the kitchen again, to remember what a good life I had. But I'm done with that now. I'm done with everyone who abandoned me, replaced me. When I went to put the glasses in the envelope to Andrea, the eyes were seething with resentment. They could have been a reflection of my own by now. His and his wife's murders went unavenged. But I resented him, too. What loving father would show his child such terrible things? Maybe he can't help it, but I don't know how cursed glasses work. I only know I wish I'd never seen any of it. I slipped them unceremoniously into the puffed envelope and threw in a little note. Put these on and come find me, Dad.